This is the Conservative Crusader.
Well, welcome back. This is the Conservative Crusader. Joining us now is a lawyer and a state representative for the 12th District of Ohio, a more proud title, or a title I'm more proud of, being a friend of the program, Representative Brian Stewart. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, I appreciate you hopping back on. Before we get into anything state legislative involved, tomorrow is the most important election, at least in my opinion, of Ohio history. We have two major ballot initiatives plus all the municipal elections. What are your thoughts on the ballot initiatives? How do you think they'll do? And do you think they should pass? I hope I know your answer to that one.
Well, issue one is really what I've focused a lot of my attention on, Josh. I mean, I've been pro-life longer than I knew I was a Republican, frankly. And it's a radical pro-abortion amendment to our Constitution. It's not pro-choice. It is pro-abortion. And this language is drafted in such a way that it would invalidate parental notification and parental consent laws. It's drafted broadly enough to potentially invalidate, any legislative efforts, frankly, that I'm working on right now to ban sex change operations for minors. It would allow abortion all the way up until birth. These are extreme policies, and even the pro-choice people that I know do not support those kinds of policies. And so we need to vote no. I've been working to encourage a no vote, frankly, since this spring when the language was first announced. And if we, unfortunately, I think it's going to come down to the wire. But if pro-life and even some reasonable pro-choice folks that we know come out, we can defeat issue one. And obviously, issue two would legalize marijuana. It's a very under the radar campaign, I think, on both sides. But the difference there is it's a statute. It's not a constitutional amendment. And so if it passes, the legislature can still have some wriggle room to make some tweaks to make sure that if there are, major problems with it, if it passes, that we're able to try to get good policy for the state as well.
Well, I completely agree with everything you said there. I'm a big no on both of them, but obviously issue two is a lot easier to change. Issue one will pretty much be permanent, and that's why it's so important to vote no to the Ohioans listening in the elections tomorrow, so at the time you're listening to this. So I've had a chance to listen to you at a couple in-district events recently since this new General Assembly has begun, and your work in the Statehouse has impressed me every year you've been in there, but this year especially, tax cuts and everything else you've been doing. What's been happening in the Statehouse?
Well, obviously, Josh, we've talked before. There's some frustrating parts of being in the Statehouse, but from a policy side, I've kind of joked that I've been able to say the rare line, I'm here from Columbus and I have good news. Everybody in Ohio got an income tax cut in the budget that we just passed in July. Every single Ohio business has, for many years now, paid what's called the commercial activity tax as well. But if you're a business owner who, like mine, grosses less than $3 million in a year, we've eliminated the cat tax for all Ohioans who own their own business. We index the homestead exemption to inflation. I get calls from Madison County, from seniors, those on a fixed income saying, Bidenomics has inflation going through the roof. And so, I'm having a hard time affording my property taxes. We've now passed a law to say that homestead exemption that protects our seniors, that's going to go up and keep pace with inflation so that, we're not letting people get priced out of their homes. We're also working on some pretty high profile items like the SAFE Act. I was a co-sponsor and very involved in Gary Click's SAFE Act, which says that we are not going to allow biological males to compete against our daughters in sports, and that we are not going to let minors who can't get a tattoo in this state without parental consent also can't go through these permanent sex change operations while they are minors. And I think that is those are some important things that we've worked on. I've got broadband expansion that I think is important to Madison County and Pickaway County. We've got to make sure that we have high-speed internet everywhere in Ohio. I sponsored the bill to create that program. We had 100,000 new households served by the internet just in the first round of that bill.
Well, that is great work. You talked a little bit about what you're working on going into the rest of the session, but what are your goals You want to get across the finish line. I know there's only a couple more days this year that you guys are going to be in formal session, but what are you working on behind the scenes leading into 2024?
Well, one of the big things we have going in the spring is called the Capital Bill. We do this once every General Assembly, and this is, there's a lot of good projects that come out of our local communities, our counties, villages, townships. And folks will come to Columbus and say, I've got a great project going on in Mount Sterling or a great project in London, and how do I make sure, can we get some help from the state to get this across the finish line? And the capital budget is one of those few opportunities where we get to say yes an awful lot. And so that is our district's money that goes to Columbus, and this is how we bring some of it back. And so I was able to get some really good projects helped out in my district, the last General Assembly, and looking forward to working for Madison, Pickaway, and Franklin County here in the new capital budget cycle as well. We want to get the SAFE Act across the finish line. I just co-sponsored a bill that's going to come out today to require businesses to use E-Verify. As we continue to have this porous, open southern border, we want to make sure that Ohio businesses are taking advantage of the E-Verify system that we have in the federal government to make sure that we're not hiring folks who are not supposed to be in this country. I will tease. I've got a few high-profile surprises, I think, that we're going to get filed here before the end of the year. Sometimes timing is delicate on some things, so you'll know those, and we're happy to come back on and talk about them when we get them introduced. I've got a bill to require all of our courts in the state to accept all court filings electronically. That's a big help to businesses and individuals who find themselves having to use the court system, and a lot more in between.
All right, no big hints on the big high profile legislation you're talking about. Nothing you can give me a bone on.
Well, Josh, I would say this: there's been an awful lot of talk in the last 5 years about capital punishment in the state of Ohio, and capital punishment is in our Ohio Constitution. And, you have a lot of folks, unfortunately, victims in this state waiting to see the duly enacted sentences carried out for, heinous murderers who took their loved ones away. And so there's some things that we can do to make sure that, Republicans are supposed to enforce the law. That's what we say that we're going to do. And so long as capital punishment remains the law of the land, I've got some ideas for making sure that we can give those victims the justice that they deserve.
Well, I appreciate that little bit of a bone, and you're welcome on anytime you want to speak about anything you're working on. It is State Representative Brian Stewart, my state representative, and I'm proud to say that. 12th District of Ohio. This election cycle, because we're going to get to the election side of it, I'm a big elections guy. You're facing a primary challenger and a challenger in the general election, assuming you get through the primary. Comparative to the last cycle, you were unopposed on both elections, I believe. What is your message to the voters, and how are you going to make sure you get across that finish line going into this next election cycle?
Well, my message is that I'm one of the most conservative members of the Ohio General Assembly, and I'm also simultaneously, still racking up big wins for our district. The American Conservative Union ranked me amongst the most conservative members of the caucus. Gave me the Conservative Achievement Award. Just this week, I got the Institute for Legislative Analysis came out with their awards, named me as a defender of limited government, also ranked me amongst the most conservative members of the caucus. But that doesn't mean I just sit around and vote no all day either, right? I mean, I got 11 bills or resolutions passed in my first term. I've introduced half a dozen bills just this year. And Josh, I've been a leader on the big items that are facing Ohio. I've traveled the state for my Ohio Constitution Protection Amendment. I've been on the forefront of all of the biggest debates that we've had in the Ohio General Assembly for the last 3 years. We cannot afford in this district to have a backbencher member of the Ohio legislature. And so I've been a leader, and I think that has resulted in wins for our district. And I think that is something that conservatives that I know appreciate. When we send people to the Ohio Statehouse, for on-the-job training, they're not going to get wins for the conservative movement. I've won 9 elections in a row by wide margins. We've been very successful in fundraising. We're going to head into the new year probably with $100,000 in the bank for this campaign. And that's why I've got essentially, a huge list of endorsements already from, leaders in the party, in the county governments, saying that they want me back at the Statehouse. And, Josh, you spend some time on Twitter too. If you want to ruin a Democrat's day, tell them you're sending Brian Stewart back to Columbus. And I think that says a lot to our folks.
I know there's some journalists who are not going to name that love to attack you. And when you're attacked by the quote unquote journalists in the Statehouse, you make me awful happy. Not naming names, not singling out anyone. And there's some interesting work out there. But when you're chased into a parking garage by a big leftist that lost by 60 points, I do understand why we support you.
Yes, Donald.
Donald. Yeah. We know who we're talking about. So where can people who are interested in supporting your campaign from all over the nation find out more about you? If they have a question or a constituent concern, how can they get in contact? All that fun stuff.
Well, if you're a constituent, you've got official business. Thankfully, we have a state house office that my legislative aide is answering the phone all day. So, find our official office there at the State House. Call the Rife Center office. We are happy to help all of our constituents. On the campaign side, StewartForOhio.com. That's StewartForOhio.com is my website. If you go to that site, you'll also see the helpful Win Red link that will let you support the cause and donate to the campaign. Make sure we have all of the ammunition we need for the campaign ahead.
I also believe there's a. Oh, go ahead.
And obviously, I'm very active on Twitter at Brian Stewart OH. Again, that is at Brian Stewart OH, and our Facebook page. Brian Stewart, State Representative. We share a lot of information there as well.
I believe there's another redirect that goes to your website, but StewartForOhio.com is the much better way to get there. At StewartForOhio.com. Thank you for hopping on again, Representative Stewart. Always glad to speak with you and get you to listen to the future. That's my big thing, is Republicans actually reaching out to the youth. You've been a consistent guest. You've always impressed me. I appreciate you coming on again.
Josh, it's great to be with you. Always appreciate your work. Glad you're in the fight.
Yes, sir. I'll stay tuned. I remember last time I met you or saw you in person, I'll get one of those Stewart for Ohio shirts. So I can't wait for that. Just reminding you again.
It's got your name on it.
Yes,
it's
sir.
in my mobile campaign office right now. Next time I see it, it's yours.
All right. We're so back. All right. Brian Stewart, StewartForOhio.com. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll be back after this here on The Conservative Crusader.
You're listening to The Conservative Crusader.